Welcome to another episode of Hiring for Good. With me, as usual, is my lovely co-host, Suzanne Hannafin. Good morning, Suzanne.
Good morning, Tanis.
Hi. And today we'll be diving into the world of biotech innovation and leadership with a guest who's dedicated over 25 years to advancing scientific research and commercialization. Joining us is Matt Beaudet, a visionary leader with a proven track record in the biotech industry. From his early days at Molecular Probes and Life Technologies to co-founding and leading InVivo Biosystems, Matt has consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible in drug discovery and genetic research. Now, as CEO of Araceli Biosciences, Matt is leveraging cutting-edge technology to accelerate biotechnological advancements, ensuring that groundbreaking research moves from the lab to real-world impact. Beyond his executive roles, Matt is a dedicated mentor to emerging startups, an advocate for practical innovation, and a firm believer in the power of technology to solve complex health challenges. Today, we'll explore Matt's journey, his approach to leadership, and his insights into building teams that drive meaningful change. Get ready for an inspiring conversation. Welcome to Hiring for Good, Matt.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Yes, it's our pleasure. We typically start out by asking our guests to tell us just a little bit about your current project, and then you can back up and tell us kind of your journey to get where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Araceli Biosciences, and we make tools, instrumentation, and software that help big pharma companies speed up their drug discovery process.
Okay, and then let's back up and get to tell us the how'd you get to
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I've been thinking about this leading up to this interview. Mm-hmm. It started in the 90s, and I'd come fresh out of the University of Oregon, and I was just looking for a job that would, I'd just gotten married, and I was just looking for a job that would help me for a year or two. And I stumbled into a startup that was called Molecular Probes. Mm-hmm. Or I shouldn't call it a startup, an early stage company. And it was sort of in this exciting a growth phase where they were doubling the revenue like really quickly, like almost every 18 months.
Wow.
And I remember that because every 18 months we would have a pizza and ice cream party when we would double our revenue.
Yes.
That was the reward.
Yeah.
But in the context of teams and leadership, what was really interesting about that specific company was that it was founded by Dick and Rosaria Hogland, so a husband and wife team. And they had really built up this company, one of the first biotech companies in Oregon, in Eugene. Actually, it was first in Junction City and then in Eugene. And they grew it, I think, like a mom and pop, would normally. It was very people and family focused, and so everybody who worked there had been there for a long time. And I often joke that my position there was so entry level that it was below the dishwasher, but that actually speaks more about the dishwasher. Mm-hmm. He was somebody who had worked there for over a decade. His children had started to work there in different roles and had grown and in their own careers. And that was my entry into biotech, was this people-focused environment, and it was a big meritocracy that gave me, when I had a little bit of success, it gave me room to have even more success and grow. And then it was a really quickly growing and successful company, so it got acquired in 2003, I believe, by InVitrogen, and InVitrogen was this very aggressive, very fast-growing, even faster than Molecular Probes growing company. And so it was acquiring, a couple companies, at times a couple companies a month.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so everything that I thought had been fast and had been, this meritocracy was put on steroids inside InVitrogen. And it was just a playground for people, for me. And there was really, there was two key differences between Molecular Probes and InVitrogen. One of them was just that it was, because it was so fast growing, and I had this boss, his name was Jerry Ruth, and he saw that it was this Wild West sort of environment, and that hesitation would kill you, and being fast acting was how you could find success. And he encouraged me to like really lean into that. And there was this one time where we needed somebody down in California, and he's like, nobody was raising their hand, and I said, I'll go. And so they sent me, and it turned out they were looking for a representative for the entire business unit, a multi-million dollar, $100 million business unit. And I was 26 years old. I was relatively low in the company, and Jerry Ruth had really enabled me to go there and just represent all of us. And the company was growing so quickly that I then became kind of the de facto representative of that business unit for this one area. It was super exciting. The other part that I really learned, and I learned a lot of this from a different boss of mine named Chakalingam Palaniappan, and so he goes by Palani. But that was really how to be an entrepreneur. That was how you could go out and you could pitch your ideas and find money for your projects and find success internally. And so, and it really, what it literally meant was that if your own boss or boss's boss would not fund your project, you could go to some other business unit and get money for it, which was politically very dangerous, but career-wise very lucrative for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so really at that time, it was during that time at at Invitrogen where I really started to grow my own team. And I had these two great role models, Jerry Ruth and Palani, that were showing me how you enable people as a way to find success for yourself and for the company. And so that's what I learned a lot about that at Invitrogen, and I really tried to emulate it later on. And it was actually, the company continued to grow until it was no longer that really rich, dynamic environment. It was, it was approaching 10,000 people, and it was getting acquired by Thermo, which is one of the largest biotechs in the world. And it was at that time that I really was contemplating striking out on my own. And it was Palani again who had encouraged me to, why don't you start your own company? And so I left, and I started my own company. It was called Cellfire. I started with Shula Jaron and Richard Fiquette, two close friends of mine, and the company was just this amazing failure. It was not just that it failed. It just died like in the middle of the street, and and it was really then that it was like a rude awakening that I saw that everything that I had thought that I'd learned about entrepreneurship was really intrapreneurship, and that it was this whole other world of figuring out how to find capital, how to form companies, how to even find customers, how to do all of that stuff when you're on your own that I just didn't know how to do. And so I was lamenting this with a couple people, Shula again, as well as Joe Marushak and Jason Boone, about how there wasn't the infrastructure in Oregon to help startups start up. And so we started a nonprofit to help startups start up. So the irony here, of course, was that I had no idea how to help startups start up, but we started a nonprofit to do it, and it really worked. We got these amazing speakers to come in. We got successful entrepreneurs to just start hanging out there. We even got funding and could hold pitch competitions. And and I saw and it attracted other companies that were further along than me. And it really gave me this great ground work of like how other people were doing it. And so with that, I met these two professors at the University of Oregon, Janice Weeks and Sean Lockery, and they had this great technology and this beginning of a company, but they needed somebody with more of a business and biotech background. And so I joined that. That company was called Nemometrics. We later rebranded it as InVivo Biosystems. And that was my first real playground of my own to try to translate all those things that I had learned at Molecular Probes and Invitrogen and even at Cellfire, and try to translate it. How do I build that same team? That both the teams that we care for each other, and the teams that are growing and dynamic and aggressive in my own company.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. You talked about kind of crashing and burning, and how we learn so much more when we fall down and skin our knee than we get a gold medal, right?
Yeah.
And I bet I mean, looking back, what were some of those big learnings? Like today you go, God, we were so naive, or we should have done this, or what was it?
Yeah, there's so many of them, but it's interesting. I say it all the time that I aim for 70% success. And part of that is a little bit that you learn from your failures, but also part of it is, you've got to be really leaning forward enough that you're failing some of the time to actually just achieve that speed that you want. When I think back about some of my biggest failures, it's not, I've had huge projects, multi-million-dollar projects that have failed. So where I have burned millions of dollars, and I've never really looked at those as my big failures because they usually were paired with some other success before or after. So I felt like it was in sort of that math. It worked. My biggest failures actually are always, the ones that I think about a lot are always about the people, and I think, I think you had a question that you had suggested maybe you're going to ask me that was about, if you could go back in time.
Yeah.
And, when I read that, I immediately knew what it was. There was this one time where very early on when I was a very young manager that, somebody who reported to me, somebody under me, had been working on this project amongst a team, and in an all-employee meeting, 200-300 people, the president got up and thanked the members of that team, and he omitted her. And I didn't speak up, and I didn't correct him, and I didn't stand up for her. And it's really. And her name was Bethany Sutton. She was really an amazing person who has gone on to have great success. And I knew what was the right thing to do, and I didn't do it, and I didn't stand up for her. And I think that's the thing that's really stuck with me is events like those.
That is so. It really speaks to your heart. I think of who you are, like the thing that's keeping you up at night after all these years. And I mean, we will tag Bethany on LinkedIn for this article. We will let her know that she deserves to be recognized for her work. But I mean, it's kind of like really telling, I think, about probably who you are as a leader. That your focus is on the human element.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we have these values that as a leader, we do operationalize those values in our businesses. And so here you've gone through a name change. You're having great success. I believe you just received some additional capital.
Yeah. Araceli,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
And so what are some of these values that you really try to incorporate into the business, not just as like these are our company values, but really operationalizing those?
Yeah, it's my two biggest values and the ones that I interview for, and I just tell people this, when I'm interviewing them, is I'm really looking for empathy and positivity. And there's really two different reasons for each of those.
I'm going to interrupt because that's not common for scientific research and development, is the empathy. That's interesting.
Well, at the end of the day, what empathy is where you're able to stand in somebody else's shoes and see things from their perspective. And, I think especially in the scientific domain, in the biotech where you're creating tools for other people, you're needing to understand what are your customers looking for, and even in a regulated environment, what's the FDA? Like, how can I put myself in an auditor's shoes? How can I put myself in a customer's shoes? How can I see it from their perspective, how they're going to interpret this or their needs, or what's keeping them up at night? And science is such a team-based effort that also being able to put yourself in the shoes of the person to your right and to your left that you work with every day is really critical to get that high-performing team. And then the positivity is because, you're stuck with these people for a long time. So you don't really want
You don't want a downer on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is actually pretty easy to interview for those things too.
That's really interesting. Actually, I really love the idea of what you're saying makes a ton of sense. But I love the idea of like kind of looking for the positive scientists that also can really. I would think honestly, when people go into careers in the sciences, their training is as a scientist. So it's kind of has to be endemic to who they are to be able to like really kind of, think through how others would be feeling. And I could see how that would be a very, highly coveted skill for your team. Backing up just a tiny bit, you talked about like what keeps you up at things that you kind of go back to. What were the other most formative actual experiences, and what did they teach you? Do you mind just speaking to that?
Yeah, there's really been two big events that I think back on often with really positive feelings that they were just great. One of them was back, God, I can't quite remember the year, but a long time ago. And I was bringing this device to the market. I had worked really closely with this woman named Jill Hendrickson. She and I were business partners for like a decade and a half, a long time. And we had been working to bring this great device to the market. It was groundbreaking for many reasons. One of them that I loved was just that it was race car red. It was just beautiful. But we're bringing it into a blue ocean market. There wasn't that much competition, but we knew that this was a big opportunity. And so we had really been building up for this launch. And, again, millions of dollars, lots of effort, lots of people, a big team. And we had this great woman named Wenlin Hu that was doing our marketing. And she had done this great job to actually build up some demand before it was even launched. And when it launched, we almost immediately fell into a multi-million-dollar back order, which is exciting. It's like a champagne dream.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But we also immediately fell into some of those standard things that happen at the first of a launch. Yeah. There was a hardware problem. There was a software problem. There was supply chain issues. There was a storm with ice and stuff. Things were getting caught in customs. And so, we faced up against this. My boss, again, at the time was Polony, and he was like, I don't know how to fix this, but you do, so just go do it. And we had such a team that was so excited by this and emboldened and enabled by this. And I think a little bit even young enough that we thought that we could actually fix anything, that we went ahead and we did it. We actually took over the entire lunchroom in the company for weeks and weeks. We set up, almost around the clock shifts over the weekend through holidays. Really opening boxes, fixing issues, updating software, QCing, repackaging, adding little notes to the customer, all of that, and shipping these out.
Wow.
And it became it became the largest launch, successful launch in the company's history. And it was all these people, these young people, Laurel Stone, Adam Zahner, Chrissy Rempel, Nancy Ennert, Rob Batchelor, that had really just put in the work to make this be a success. And what I really saw was, it was that energy of a team that can come together and work together and, again, be positive and empathetic to each other that enabled this dramatic success.
Isn't it amazing when you are part of a team and see what, everybody can do? And it's so uplifting. You will carry that for your entire life because that's incredible. Yeah. And to be part of that's awesome.
Yeah, it really was. The other story that I think about I think about a lot was at the very, very beginning of the pandemic. So this was InVivo Biosystems, and at the very beginning of the pandemic, right before the pandemic, I was raising an investment round, and I had investors lined up. I was starting to hire for that future money that was about to come in, really ramping up our sales organization. I had about 50 employees, and then really literally overnight, everything stopped. Our customers, they couldn't get into their labs. They didn't need us. The projects that were in flight, they called and paused them all. The investors canceled their investment. And, every single advisor I had.
Were you the CEO at the time?
I was the CEO.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
And so, every single advisor I had called me up, proactively called me up, and they said, fire as many people as you can stomach.
Oh, God.
Cut as deep as you can, go down to the bone. And I had a great chairman of the board at the time, a good friend, one of my best advisors I've ever had, a guy named Rick Miller, a larger than life figure. And he built up a senior care empire. But he has such a strong belief that the decisions we make can positively impact people. And that's how he's built up his business, and it's how he runs, his employees under him. And I went home and I sat with everything that I'd learned from Rick. I sat and I thought all the way back to molecular probes and how it treated its employees like family. And I sat with what did I want to do at this moment? And it was really within like 24 hours, I came back and I called everybody together, and I said, I'm going to give everybody a haircut. So my own salary went to zero. My managers under me, their salary was cut in half. The ones under them had a 25% reduction, and everybody else retained their full salary. And I said, we're not going to fire anybody. And this won't be the only haircut that we do, but I'm going to keep it going with healthcare as long as I can. Because at that time, I had no idea whether this was a month problem or whether, people were going to be dying and this was the end.
Yeah.
Not quite that dramatic.
But it felt like it.
Well, we didn't know.
It did.
Yeah. I remember really kind of being like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
And I don't, at that time there was only 7 of us, and going, what am I going to do? And that frozen, I have no idea.
Yeah. And I went back to these thinking about molecular probes and Rick Miller, and I thought 2 things. I have a job to do, and I have a duty to everybody that works for me. And at the exact same time that I have a duty to the company and to retain its value, and our highest value is our people. And so that was the decision that I felt was going to protect people and retain the value of the company. And it worked. We did make it through there, and we made it through the other side. And like I said, we retained the value of the company.
Absolutely. And I bet your employees, and again, looking back, I can't believe it's been, 5 years.
Yeah.
When that first shutdown, in fact, this month, 5 years ago, the world shut down.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to think, 'cause it just seems like so science fiction that, but
the lost years of our lives.
I know.
Matt's like, I wish it was a book. No.
But looking at your teams and your employees, do they understand and recognize the sacrifice? And
well, I want to be careful there because this wasn't a gigantic sacrifice.
Okay.
And this was a decision that I felt was the right one for people and for the company. And so, this definitely was not a martyr sort of situation. I believe that it was, and I was open with the employees, this is why I'm making these decisions. Yeah. Please give me your guidance as well. Although I will say at that exact moment, because I was getting so much advice that I was not believing in, that I did become much more narrow in my acceptance of outside advice during that time.
That's interesting too. How did it go when you went back to your advisory board or the investors who were, telling you to
It is funny, I have board meetings, regular board meetings, and I made this decision outside of the board. And so I came back and I just said, I was holding emergency board meetings at that time. And I just said, this is what I'm doing. And, and everybody believed that was the right decision. And so they got behind me, and there was a lot of clarity in those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you look today then on building teams, we talked about these two key characteristics, but how do you go about today adding, growing? Is there a strategy? Is there?
Well, in the context of teams, yes, there is. And actually, if you go back and reevaluate some of these stories in this context, one of the big things that I have learned over the years was what I said. I'm aiming for 70%, success. And, lots of people believe that means that I dive into risk, that I like risk. And the truth is it's the other way around. I'm actually highly risk adverse. But instead, I like to think that I'm strategically risk adverse. And what I look for in my leadership team is people that are also strategically risk adverse. And what I mean by that is, we can all see that if we do an action, perhaps we're risking losing a key customer, or maybe the R&D project's going to fail, or the marketing is going to be a flop, or we're going to spend money and we're going to waste, some of it. Those are all micro risks. The big risk that's really ever present for a startup is that you are going to take too long. You will burn your money. Your competitors will get there before you, that you will miss the boat. That's the big risk that keeps me up at night and keeps my team up at night. So I have these two leaders right now, Sean McDonald and Scott Eigel, and they are both, on the scale of things, conservative fellows. They're very well thought out with what they do, and they really put a lot of planning into all of their efforts. They also are two of my boldest leaders, and it's because I really feel like, and I learn a lot from them. They are that perfect strategic risk aversion. We know that if we do nothing or if we take too long, we will fail. Therefore, let's do this quick. Let's try something that itself is risky because it decreases the big risk.
That's fascinating. And I wonder, it's probably hard to fully calibrate that. Do you have any way to kind of measure or make plans, or is it just kind of we know we need to do it, so let's go? And
yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think it's that, this is why I say 70%, because if I feel like people are very, if they're just foolishly risk tolerant, then their failure rate gets down to 60 or 50%. And if they are not, if they don't understand that strategic side of it, then their failure rate is 20, they're, so that's how I calibrate it.
Yes, I actually love this topic of conversation. I don't know that we've ever had someone articulate this kind of, impetus for movement and, talking about risk in this exact way. I like the idea that you're sharing. It's very cool.
Well, and it made me kind of go down the same line of thinking that here you have the same organization for a number of years, but you've had major changes, not just a name change, but other really big changes. And again, it's easy to keep doing what we do, but talk about some of those changes and what helped you through it.
Well, so I'm actually with a new organization, a new company for the last 9 months.
So, Matt, all of this is so interesting. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your current project and kind of catch it. So we've kind of gone through, all of these different learnings and experiences. When did you move over to Araceli? And are you you're the founder, correct?
Of Araceli?
Yeah.
No, actually, so
Okay.
Araceli is super interesting. Yeah. So I had a great time with InVivo Biosystems and building it up over a decade. And really, it was this great founding team with Sean Lockery and Janice Weeks, and quickly joined by Kat McCormick, who was my second in command for so long. And that company underwent a lot of evolution during that time. And the last evolution that it really had to take was so it was a service company that was helping other people find and develop drugs or therapeutics. And along the way, it had picked up some potential therapeutic leads itself. And the next evolution was really to focus on those. And that's not something that's a passion of mine or even something that I'm that good at. But it is for Kat McCormick. And so, I transitioned the company over to being led by her. And it was around that time that I met a guy named Bill Cordelou. And he was the CEO of a company called Phosion, which is in the semiconductor space. But he had been taking some of his learnings in that industry and had done this beginning of a company called Araceli that took all of that capability, the industrialization, the high throughput, the high speed, very high or low tolerance for error, and translated that to that early stage of drug discovery equipment. And that equipment, those tools, is something that I've always been excited by and worked in. And that was where I was successful at InVitrogen. And so over the course of a pretty short amount of time, I was surprised that it was a good fit for me and him. And I came on and took over that company as CEO.
And so fairly new, but I think it's interesting that you said, he came from an industry that really is about efficiencies, processes. How is that adapting into more of the research, creative, let's figure out a way of doing things?
We're right now in the middle of a revolution in how drugs are being discovered. Now, in the pharma industry, a revolution usually takes 1 to 2 decades. So it's been going on for a little while, and it still has a lot of room in front of it. But it's simplistically called AI-driven drug discovery. But the truth is, how do you generate massive amounts of data that has both in scale and depth, and use something that's way beyond Excel spreadsheets to correlate that to clinical trials, to other publications, to chemical structures, and come up with unique insights that can find therapeutics that perhaps would never have been possible before. And that's the revolution that's going on right now, but it requires that scale and that process of experimentation that can't really be done with the equipment that's around today. And we're one part of that puzzle of industrializing that process.
That's a little scary, to be honest, and fascinating at the same time, because a lot of the research is out there. And again, having AI or something saying, now there's a correlation between this and this, let's put that together. I mean, it's an exciting time, and I have a feeling it's going to, just like the information, speed up.
I do want to be cautious here that all of this AI is meant to find the potential hits.
Right.
It still goes through the same process
yeah.
for safety and efficacy that it always has. But, the thing that's really frustrated me my entire career is how drugs are currently developed. And, I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but really what it is a pharma company makes a bet. They think if we fix this one thing, then we will have a drug, and that drug will be worth so much money that we can afford all of this work. It takes 14 years, and to get one success costs $1 billion, but only 10% of their efforts are successful.
I think it's less than. It's like 7.
It's been increasing over the year over year, and so it's depends on how you measure, but it's close to 10% now. But that means that all those failures, the billions that went into failures, they burden the successes. So that means that we can only, or they will only look for therapeutics for diseases that affect enough people and are severe enough that the payoff works. And so rare diseases, which is a really low bar for what a rare disease is. So if you know somebody that has a disease, but you only know one person that has that disease, it's a rare disease. And so that one person does not cross the threshold for being worthy of getting a therapeutic made for them. And so we have to change that. And, one of the things that has driven me forever is that I believe we can change it. And I believe that we can change it in a time span so that I can see people's lives get saved because of the work that, I've been a part of. And InVivo Biosystems definitely had those successes. And, and I believe Araceli is that next step where we do that even faster.
And so, right now, it's a little bit of a crazy time in bioscience. We're speaking just in the wake of potential federal funding cuts and other things that are going to really impact this ecosystem. It's going to probably turn into even more of a battle to access funds to create solutions. You've just had a win. What do you think was a differentiator in your message? When you speak about increasing the equitable, access to therapeutics, making that more accessible to everybody who needs it or something, that's a message that's like really inspiring. If you're talking about decreasing the time that it takes to develop these solutions, that's really inspiring. What part of, your solution or your message do you think is resonating with investors, and what do you see for the future?
Yeah. So, we're still early stage. We have a number of customers, a number of very big customers, but we're still relatively early stage. And so is that revolution, that transition in the overall market. So the thing that speaks to our investors right now is that we have big customers that are paying $500,000 to buy some of our equipment, at a pop.
Yeah.
and so it's really that traction.
Yeah. I mean, that's very impressive if you're early stage to have those.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's just okay.
Yeah.
I was like, but still, well, it's good to hear that you're on sound fiscal ground and you have an inspiring message.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, you do need to add passion and make a third one, because listening to you and seeing the body language, you can feel the passion that is there.
You. And it's absolutely true.
It is a very exciting time. Again, a little on the scary side sometimes, but exciting to see what the next 10 years will bring.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So as you know, this podcast is called Hiring for Good. And it's nuanced to where it means something different for everyone. What does it mean for you?
It's interesting. One of the things that I really strongly believe is that I'm on my own growth journey. I'm not fully baked. I'm still evolving, and so is everybody else that I hire. And we're each in just a different part of our trajectory. But when I think about hiring for good, what I think about is how do you find those matches in trajectory? We're not in the same place, but we're on the same curve. And I've talked about this before, but my own view of my role in Araceli, my own view of Araceli's role in Oregon, and my own view of Oregon's role in the overall economy is that we're really trying to make these opportunities for people to find their own passion and to find career growth, and even personal growth along the way. And I somewhat jokingly say so that they can find a place that they're happy enough to stay in, that they can go and they can get married and buy a house and get a dog and have children. And all along that way, they can continue to develop and grow here in Oregon.
I love that. No, it's about bigger than you, bigger than an individual. It's the community. Absolutely. I cannot thank you enough, Matt, for joining us today. This has been so much fun, and I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I knew you would be an amazing guest. I was lucky enough to, first chat with you about a year ago at a bio event, and I was just like, this is a CEO the world needs to hear from. It's a great message.
Well, thank you. I've really appreciated the space for introspection. So
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.